So hi everybody, I am Susan Belmonte and I am the pre-teaching and pre-graduate advisor on campus. My role today is as pre-graduate advisor and I'm part of the pre-graduate and pre-professional advising team. Our acronym is PGPP. And the purpose of today is to help those of you who are thinking about graduate school find out more from students who are actually in graduate school and also to hear from faculty about both applying to graduate school, but then also what is it like training graduate students and working with graduate students. And then at the end, Arish and I will talk a little bit more about the resources that are available to you and how to move forward from today. Perfect. And thank you to all our panelists for helping make this happen.
Hi, I'm Risha Reed, and I'm the Interim Assistant Director for Student Innovation and Undergraduate Research in the Office of Undergraduate Education, similar to Susan. And similar to Susan, we're here to provide a vehicle for students to be successful in research at Georgia Tech, but also to be successful afterwards as well. And so one of the ways that students can do that is to get into the grad school of their choice and to do the just make those world-changing decisions that they want to make. And so we're here for that. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the next steps for you, but let's jump right in and learn a little bit more about our panelists today. Susan, do we have everyone here that we're seeing on the screen? I can't see.
Yeah, except for
Joy.
Joy's going to be late. So
yes, perfect. And so, Susan, do you want to take the faculty and I'll take the students in terms of introductions?
Sure. Or do we want to have everybody introduce themselves?
Okay, perfect. That would work as well.
Perfect.
So we can go in the order. We can go in the order of the screen in terms of we start with Dr. Arriaga and then we end with Josh Wall.
All right, Dr. Arriaga.
Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for coming. So I am Associate Chair, and that means that I get to review all of the milestones for the graduate students in interactive computing. We actually have about 7 different PhD programs. And the nice thing about IC is that we have both the kind of traditional computer science PhDs, and then we have this really exciting computer science meets social science PhD, which is called HCC, and Vishal can tell you about that. I'm happy to answer any questions about graduate school, about even thinking about letter writing, etc. Thank you.
Joy will be here a little bit late for this, so she'll be here around 11:20. And so, Dr. Clifford.
Hi, I'm Gary Clifford. I'm the Chair of Biomedical Informatics over at Emory and also a Professor of Biomedical Engineering in the joint Georgia Tech Emory program. And actually my research group's split over both campuses, so I spend some of the time in my office in the Coda building with my Georgia Tech students there and some of my time over at Emory. I have this split existence. Before I came to Emory, I was an associate professor at Oxford, where I was the director of a PhD training program there. So I can also sort of speak to some international aspects of this as well. Julia, over to you.
Perfect. Dr. Melkers?
Dr. Melkers.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Julia Melkers from the School of Public Policy. I'm very happy to be here. I'm always excited to talk to students about their futures. So in the School of Public Policy at Georgia Tech, we do a lot of what we think are very interesting things. We often describe our school as mirroring and complementing the institute overall. So we're a little different from other schools of public policy where we actually study things that really match up with everything that you guys are all doing out there. So we study science policy, information policy, cybersecurity policy, energy and environment policy. So we're very different, I think, that way. As a result, I think we also attract a lot of students with actually undergraduate degrees in engineering and the sciences, and we have mechanisms to help students kind of get up to speed with social sciences if you haven't done that much. Personally, I study actually careers in science, including looking at some of the issues that students grapple with and experience as they're preparing for careers in STEM, but I also study faculty careers and the careers and transitions of PhD students and doctoral students. I also run a lab that has yet to have a really great website, or any website for that matter, but it has a cool name called ROCKS, which is Research on Careers in Science. I typically employ some and hire, I love hiring students from across campus because it's just really interesting to get a mix of degrees. But and we've also published in the social sciences with students from schools outside of SPP. And I'm really excited to share whatever I can today.
Dr. Ross?
I'm Kyla Ross. I'm the Assistant Vice Provost for Advocacy and Conflict Resolution here at Georgia Tech. I previously was the Director of Graduate Training in the Department of Biomedical Engineering, and also long ago was a student here at Georgia Tech in that joint program. So lots of experiences working with graduate students. I think I bring a really unique perspective here. Previously was really involved in recruitment efforts and training efforts for graduate students and can certainly speak to that. Currently, I work on more conflict resolution and mediation sorts of issues related to graduate students and their advisors, but I'm happy to share any insight on today's panel. I'm very glad to be here.
Yasmin?
Hi, everyone. My name is Yasmin Vasile. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a first-year PhD student over at Emory University. I'm completing a PhD in neuroscience. Couple other facts about me. I just graduated from Georgia Tech actually in spring 2020, so a recent graduate, completed a bachelor's in neuroscience as well. And at Georgia Tech, I was involved in the undergraduate research ambassador. So undergraduate research, I actually conducted undergrad research over at Emory University while I was at Georgia Tech. So I can talk about how you can do that and the interdisciplinary nature of undergraduate research. And at Georgia Tech, I was also involved in the international student sphere as well. And so if you have any questions about undergraduate research or just how to transition into being a graduate student, just let me know and I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding that.
Perfect. Vishal?
Hello everyone, this is Vishal here. I am a second year PhD student in the School of Interactive Computing. And as Professor Arriaga already mentioned, I work at the intersection of social sciences and computing to understand how computing can be used to address real world problems. And prior to coming to Georgia Tech, I was at UC Irvine, and I'm an international student, so I'm happy to answer all the questions if you have regarding that.
Amanda?
Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Liu. I recently finished my MPH in Global Environmental Health, and before that I graduated from Georgia Tech in 2018. I was in biology and I had initially planned on going into med school, but then I found the wonderful world of public health. So now I am working at the CDC as a part of the National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases. And I am a part of the Pandemic Response Task Force. So yeah, if you guys have any questions about public health, send them my way. I know people are not entirely sure what public health professionals do. So yeah, happy to be here.
Josh?
Hey, my name is Joshua Wall. I'm a first year master's student in the School of Public Policy. I've been researching with Dr. Melkers in the undergraduate program and the master's program. So I would be happy to speak to you about the BSMS program or undergraduate research or transitioning from undergraduate to graduate student. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to put, when Dr. Harris joins, she will probably continue the conversation, but I just want to say that she has a number of roles, Dr. Harris does, on Georgia Tech's campus. She's a senior academic professional in ECE, but she's also the faculty director of our very own center, Engineering for Social Innovation Center, and also the associate director over at CreateX. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship and innovation, should also be the go-to for you as well. And so we're going to jump right in with asking a few questions of our panelists. I'm going to stop sharing right now so that we can actually see a little bit more and see their faces a little bit more. So my very first question goes to the graduate students. And so can everyone speak to what have been some of the challenges you experienced transitioning from being an undergrad to a graduate student? And so let's start off with in the reverse order. So Josh, do you want to start off? And we'll go in that direction.
Sure. So this is my first semester, so I don't have a ton of experience, but I will say, you know, the graduate courses are definitely a faster pace. They're going to be a lot deeper in conversation. I will say, so I was taking some master's classes as an undergraduate, and there would be times, you know, where the conversation may be a little bit above my head. So, you know, trying to, you know, follow up with classmates, follow up with professors after class to make sure you're really understanding the concepts of the course. So in public policy, you know, once you get up into the master's level courses, you're really diving deep into models and theories and you know, things of that nature that are a little more difficult than the application type skills and knowledge that you're learning in the undergraduate program.
Amanda?
Yeah, so I guess one of the biggest challenges I faced, at least, was kind of more on the personal end outside of schooling. When I was at Tech, you know, I was really involved in the community. I was an RA. I did a ton of undergraduate research and, you know, various labs. But then, you know, I went to Emory, and it was a pretty big culture shock, I think. The students are very different, and I think like one of the things I realized, I was like, oh, you know, you don't really, your friends don't live, you know, across the hall from you anymore. And you're just kind of, you're expected to do things without anyone really kind of hounding you to do it. So yeah, for me, I think it was just a matter of learning how to balance things and also, you know, develop my own routine. Because in grad school, they really do not care if you go to class. They just expect you to, you know, do what you need to do. And I think not having that kind of accountability was something that I was a little bit startled by. So yeah, I feel like that was kind of what I struggled the most with adjusting.
Vishal?
Yeah. So I think one of the challenges that I faced while joining uh, graduate school, and I still face, is the imposter syndrome, where you think that everybody else knows everything and you don't know anything, and what are you doing in the program, and why are you even there in the program? But which I, after spending so I did my master's before starting my PhD at UC Irvine. So after spending 3 years as a graduate student, I would say that is normal. But I think even though everybody tells you that it's normal, you are not going to listen to them until you experience it yourself and learn it yourself. So yeah, I just want to reassure you that it is normal. It happens. Not everybody knows everything. You will feel in that way, but that's really not the case. And I think Professor Ariaga can add more to that because she is always there to help us in such scenarios, and she's always available to talk. So yeah, find resources that you can leverage during your graduate career, graduate school, to see how you can build community and build a transparency as well as a very friendly environment with your peers, which will help you to evolve and to move ahead in your career also.
Thank you. Yasmin?
Yeah, so actually to echo off of what Vishal said, so a couple things. So definitely imposter syndrome is a thing, but I want to remind everyone that when you go to graduate school, a lot of students get there with a lot of different areas of expertise and a lot of different backgrounds. And so, for example, I might come to graduate school knowing a lot about one specific thing, and other students will also approach that program with knowing a lot about maybe one specific area or their specific area of research in undergrad. And so a lot of times when you're in class or when you're interacting with students, people, will start talking about maybe what happens to be their area of expertise, and they'll know a lot about it. And that can definitely contribute to imposter syndrome, because you'll say, wow, I know nothing about, motor systems. I'm all about this other thing. So just to remind yourself of, everyone has their areas of expertise. Everyone comes to graduate school with their own background and with their own, in-depth knowledge about one or two specific things. And so just because people, you'll start talking about your own backgrounds and your own expertise, that doesn't necessarily mean one person's smarter than the other. It's just people come with different backgrounds and different experiences. And so reminding yourself, and that was kind of something, that I've been seeing in the first year in my PhD program, is that we'll have conversations about different neuroscience topics and everyone brings their own background to it. But it feels as if sometimes, people are much smarter than you, but that's definitely not it. Everyone just comes with different, areas of their own research and knowledge. So that's definitely something that I've been going through. And another thing I wanted to bring up is, again, everyone spends their time differently, and time management's a huge thing that I think it's an important skill to have at any point in your life, but grad school, it's really important to have it, right? You're not only juggling classes, but if you're in a PhD program, maybe you're juggling rotations in different labs or research in specific labs once you choose someone to, a faculty mentor to research with. And on top of that, you're on your own, maybe you're managing your financial situation, and you're also, your living situation, your financial situation. So there are a lot more factors that come into play when you're kind of, going to grad school, and there are just a lot more things going on. So effective time management is definitely important as well. And so that's definitely been a challenge for me, especially through a pandemic. But again, if anyone has questions, more in-depth questions, I'd love to elaborate on those.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I am also a doctoral student, and I can feel everything you're feeling. I'm in a different stage in life, and I am experiencing everything you've all voiced already, so I can completely empathize. Our next question is actually for our faculty. And faculty, what are the challenges that you see newer graduate students experiencing that are different than those you see your experienced students going through? And let's start with Dr. Ross.
Well, I'll echo some of the comments that have already been stated, because I do see some evolution, from first-year graduate students to the more experienced graduate students when it comes to the imposter syndrome, even though I feel like that's present, just so you know, for life, in every stage of life as you transition. It's not just graduate student, just FYI, something to look out for. But I think that you kind of see some confidence building over time, right, with the graduate students. So as you get embedded, let's say a PhD student, for example, who's doing research, as they get embedded in a research lab, then they're finding that community, they're finding their footing, right? They're completing their courses. I feel like the beginning part for a lot of graduate students is kind of getting through these key milestones, right? It's taking the classes, or it's passing a qualifying exam. And with each hurdle, it feels like you've just crossed the next step, and you get a little bit more confidence and a little bit more, embedded in the community, and feeling like, hey, I think I can do this. And so that does take a fair amount of time. But I think once you get to your third year and fourth year, you really see that they've crossed those milestones. For PhD students, cross those milestones. For master students, that timeline is a little bit compressed, with maybe not as many of those. Some of those milestones aren't exactly the same. I will say that the time management piece, that is a struggle, I think, for a lot of folks throughout. It just looks different at different times. So I will say that, just when a student thinks that they've got it figured out, I know how to balance my time, the next phase comes, and it's, maybe they're not taking as many classes, and they're doing more research, and it's open-ended time and that less structure. So, it does take some adapting over time. I'll let others chime in too. I could talk forever on these things, but yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ross. Dr. Melkers.
There
we go. Okay. These comments are really great, and I think I would say I've observed all of them. I want to bring in a couple of other things that I think are important, and that I think reflect some of the way that students develop and change and get more comfortable with what they're doing, and also more confident. So one of the things that I think really matters in how students succeed, and also how they feel about themselves in succeeding, is this whole idea of curiosity. So to me, going to graduate school is really about wanting to, it's really about you, and it's really about you developing what you know and your ability to demonstrate that. And so students come in with this kind of combination of absolute fear and intimidation, most of them, and some curiosity that they don't quite know how to express. And so to me, what I see are the students, as they're developing, that they get more comfortable with that. They get more comfortable with saying, I don't know that, help me figure out where to go and get that, but also, hey, I went and did this on my own. So that whole idea of kind of taking initiative and going beyond, I think this is a really distinguishing feature of graduate school at both the master's and PhD level, is going beyond what you've been asked to do. So you have something that's introduced in class. Well, you go and read more about it, and you go try more things, and you've got to balance it in terms of your time management and all of that. But to me, that really is sort of the growth that we see with graduate students is that getting comfortable, getting excited, and actually getting really kind of fueled by that curiosity. And in that, I think you get a little comfortable when, some things you fail at, and you tried it and that didn't work. And that failure can actually help you move on further. And so it's not sort of okay, you're done now, but rather that's a real hole that you need to fill, kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of self-awareness and sort of getting comfortable with yourself in developing your knowledge. But to me, the curiosity and initiative and really then engaging with others in all that. You build a learning community, and I like what Amanda said about the loneliness. Of course, everybody's experiencing that right now, but yeah, you seek out people who you not only want to kind of hang out with and fuel your social side, but you're also connecting with people who share your own passions, and you learn from each other. There's a lot more peer-to-peer learning, I think, that goes on in graduate school, and I think that makes a difference. And so making yourself open to all of that and being comfortable with it.
Thank you, Dr. Merkel. And Dr. Harris has joined us. Hi, Dr. Harris.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Hi. We introduced you earlier, but if you would like to reintroduce yourself, did you hear what the question is?
I did. Yes, I've been a fly on the wall for a while, and I'm sure you all introduced me well. I'm in electrical and computer engineering.
Okay.
The one difference that I see, and I saw it in myself, and I also see it in first years versus moving on through grad school. In the very beginning, you feel like everything that you do is trivial. So you students don't recognize I'm actually making a contribution to the field. In the beginning, the stuff that you think everybody did that, it's not that important, it's not that big of a deal. And I remember my advisor telling me, you feel that way right now because you don't know what a big deal is, but trust me, you're making the contribution. You are contributing. And so as you get older in grad school, you start to realize, okay, I did do that. It's not something that everybody else has done. And especially in engineering, because we do tend to be a lot more applied. You're in a lab actually building something. I was making stretchable circuit boards, and I just assumed everybody was making stretchable circuit boards. This is what you do. It's like, no, actually, that's not what everybody is doing. People are doing something else. So just keep that in mind, that it matters what you do in the beginning, and as you grow in your field, you'll start to realize that.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Dr. Clifford.
Well, these are great questions. I don't know where to start. I think the biggest transition and the biggest tension I think that I've seen students have, and also have myself, and probably still have, is the tension between persistence, continuing to drive at a problem, which is what graduate study is all about. You're beating a problem almost to death because you're trying to take it beyond the boundaries that anybody else has done. And the tension between that and knowing when to cut your losses, when you're actually doing something that you're probably sinking way too much time into, and that you have to know when you're throwing good time after bad and saying, okay, you know what, I need to stop right now. And I can see it across my PhD students. I have some that the first project I suggest to them goes well and everything, becomes this beautiful blossoming PhD, and they're just lucky that, the idea was sort of aligned with reality. And then there are other ones where we start something and it doesn't go well, and you have to say, okay, well, maybe now's not the time. Let's stop and let's move on. And it turns out that almost without fail, the first year of your graduate research, you completely throw away. You don't see it in your thesis. It doesn't. What it's doing is teaching you what not to do, and you can't get there. You can't jump over that. So you should never feel like you're not in the right place because things are failing. And that sort of goes into this discussion that we had around imposter syndrome as well. Everybody, unless they're a complete megalomaniac, has this element of imposter syndrome in them. In fact, I saw a really good tweet a couple of days ago from a pretty famous professor. Many of you are probably familiar with NeurIPS, this machine learning conference that is more like Comic-Con nowadays. It's so large. And this famous professor tweeted, "Am I the only person that feels I have imposter syndrome when I read other NeurIPS tweets?" And I think that's always true. We've sort of got into this world where it's impossible to learn everything. And so you're constantly looking at somebody else's work and thinking, wow, that's really insightful. How am I ever going to understand that? And part of it is learning that you can still talk to people about their research without understanding everything about it and then be an expert in your own domain. In fact, I tell my students that when they come to work with me, the first year is mostly an information flow from me to them. Then the second year is more of a dialogue. The third year, they're starting to teach me about the subject. And the fourth year, they're basically a world's expert in it. Now, that's sort of the idealized version. Time doesn't go linearly, as we know, but that's what I would hope would happen and would lead. So you shouldn't feel bad about not understanding everything and not wondering whether you're wasting your time on something, because that's the nature of research. That's what makes it fun. You're inventing the future.
Thank you, Dr. Clifford. Dr. Arriaga.
You're on mute.
Oh, you're muted.
So most things have been covered, but I'll come back to the psychosocial aspect of being in graduate school. And one of the things I tell students is that, first of all, graduate school is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you need to be able to pace yourself. And it's hard to do because, as Kyla said, at different points, you have milestones that feel like you really have to push through. And so, I remind students that grad school matters, but it's only one part of your life, and that you need to be sure to attend to the rest of it, because it's almost the kind of the proverbial, if you put all of your eggs, right? So Gary was saying something goes wrong. If that's all you have, then it's going to feel much bigger. So one of the things I try to do, which was a really important part of my graduate training, I think, was to really try to be a whole person. You're not at the end of, this is not all you're going to do. I was very lucky to go to a very good program with, world experts. And I remember one of these professors said, at the end of your life, your CV is not going to hold your hand. And so I tell my students that all the time. This is one part of your life. Enjoy it. But, that's not all. And along the same lines, it means that you need to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Right? At some point, it may not be for you, and that's okay. And so, pushing against, your mental health is not worth it. So that's the only thing I try to remind students.
Thank you so much to our faculty. Our next set of questions is going to go back to grad students. Those of you who are posting questions, we are responding to you. and we will get to your questions. So Risha, you want to ask our graduate students the next question?
Perfect. Thank you so much. So this is, we're not necessarily going to do a round robin again, is pretty much look at your faces. And if you look curious, like you want to actually answer, then we will pull out your names just to let everyone get their thoughts in. So any graduate student can answer this. What would you do differently if you could prepare for a graduate school and the application process all over again? And Yasmin, yes.
Yeah, I can go ahead and start us off. So I definitely, in preparing for graduate school, underestimated the amount of time that I needed to dedicate to my graduate application process. And I know people reiterate and reiterate, plan everything ahead of time, give yourself enough time for everything. But I really think I'm just going to be that one more reiteration of that sentiment, in that I really think planning out when you're going to be doing everything, what when in your education you're going to be applying, when are you going to take any standardized tests that you need to take, when will you be asking people for recommendations. That timeline is really important, and I think it's really good to plan ahead of time. And that may just be because I'm the planner and I'm biased, but I think it's really important to have that laid out. So for example, knowing if you need to take the GRE, when are you taking that, when are you studying for that, right? And then when are you taking that? Have that not overlap with when you're actually writing the application. Have those be separate blocks of time, because when you'll be writing the application, there are essays involved, there are other things that you want to dedicate your time to that. And then on top of that, you'll be asking faculty for letters of recommendation, and you want to be able to make sure to give them enough time to get back to you, and then also submit it to the application portal. So there are a lot of different moving parts of applying to graduate school, and I think it's really important to have that plan ahead of time. So one thing I would change, I actually took the GRE while writing my essays for my application, and I really didn't appreciate that I did that to my past self. So I definitely would try to, have those be different blocks of time and have a timeline, set for you. And there are plenty of people at Georgia Tech that can help you do that. And so I think taking advantage of those resources and having that timeline is super important.
Awesome. So while I'm seeing if anyone else wants to respond to that question, we're going to pull the questions in from the chat based on what we're discussing currently to make it relevant. And so Jaden just asked, how far ahead of the application do you recommend taking the GRE? So again, for any of our students. Yasmin, I know you.
So
I think you want to.
I will say something, and that
Awesome.
is that you need to check with the program that you are applying to, because some programs around the country have actually waived the GRE for the PhD. So that's something that you need to think about. And again, if it's going to be a strength, then take it and do really well, right? But if you can't take it, you're in a place with low bandwidth or whatever the problem is, there are many PhD programs that are waiving it. There are many PhD programs at Georgia Tech. So please be aware of that.
So actually, just as a quick elaboration, I did my research to see what programs accept and or are requiring and are not requiring the GRE. And I actually ended up applying. I didn't have the bandwidth in my last year to really study and take the GRE. So I actually only applied to programs that didn't require the GRE. And I can definitely also talk about, what kind of, how to check that. But very, very important point there is to check whether or not the program requires a GRE, whether you have the time, the bandwidth, just exactly as was said before. That's a super important piece.
Right. Josh, do you want to add something to that or no?
Sure. So speaking from the BSMS program, I think going back, I would definitely start sooner. So one really cool thing about the combined program is that you can kind of try some of these classes out in your undergraduate coursework. And so, instead of, being like a deer in the headlights, your first semester of graduate school with 3 or 4 classes at the graduate level, you're taking, 2 or 3 classes undergrad and adding a class. So it's really a chance for you to kind of, introduce yourself into graduate level work and things of that nature. And I think, one key thing for, I think, graduate school is work ethic. And so, I think, the undergraduate mindset is, and enjoy, I guess, in a sense, could be like enjoying your summers, enjoying your breaks, things of that nature. But maybe like transitioning your thinking into, staying fresh in your area of focus. So, grab a book during the summer, take a online class, like a boot camp class or things of that nature. Don't, take a whole summer off. Don't take a whole break off. Try to keep yourself fresh in the material so it's not as hard of a transition back into classes.
Michelle? Yes.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I want to add to this is that when you're applying to graduate school, it's also important to look for the people you want to work with, because the advisor-advisee relationship is a key when, especially during the PhD program. And the best way to know, so it's really important to understand the work culture of the lab before you join the lab, so you don't face any challenges or problems later. So one of the things that you can understand that work culture or your advisors, potential advisor style is by talking to the already graduate students who are working with that advisor to see, or the people who have already worked with the advisor, uh, to see how the work culture is of the lab, how the advisor relationship with the advisee is. And all of these things we actually don't think about before applying to the programs, sometimes, not always. We usually think about like the ranking of the school or the ranking of the university, but don't think about all of this like minute things that also matter. So I would say like do a very thorough research before applying to all of the different schools that you want to, and talk to people who are already working in the lab you are applying or with the professor you are applying under, to see if it will be a good fit for you to work in that particular lab or with that particular person or not.
And I want to add to that. We have had a couple of questions related to the advisor relationship. And so if this is for faculty, if maybe two of you will respond. One question was about getting emails from prospective students and what that email should look like and what you look for in an email or what shouldn't be in that email as well. And then the second question was in regards to students who have a master's degree coming into a PhD program, and what does that look like if you come into a PhD program already have a master's? What does that look like as an applicant and then in general as a doctoral student? So if two of our faculty members could respond to one or both of those, that would be
so I will go ahead and reply to the how to contact faculty members. And I'll say it, and I can imagine nobody here will do it, but do not send a stock email where you say, hello, and the thing changes so-and-so, right? You want to make sure that you have, kind of to build on Vishal's point, you want to make sure that you've targeted a couple of faculty members. You want to make sure that you've read one of their most recent work, because sometimes understand that their websites will be out of date. So you go on a website and it's from 2008 or whatever. So look at their latest papers and have something to say. The other thing is, depending on your own advisor, sometimes it's better to have somebody introduce you, right? We all have limited time. And so the question is, if you're going to do it, be thoughtful, be authentic, and then if possible, networking isn't there as much as it used to be, but you can go to conferences where they still have these breakout rooms, and that might make it easier, or have somebody else bridge that communication.
And Susan, I can address the second question real quickly about master's students. So an important thing I think to consider is if you're coming in with a master's degree and you're applying to the PhD program, is to talk to the program administrators to learn what courses you could potentially earn credit for, what the transfer. So sometimes programs will allow you to come in an advanced standing Sometimes they won't, right? So sometimes it'll be all separate courses that you have to take as part of the PhD, but a lot of times there will be some kind of transfer credit, some number of courses that could count towards the PhD. But it's really, really important that you talk about that in advance just so you can manage all of the expectations on the front end and there aren't any surprises.
Thank you. Thank you. There was also a question for you, Dr. Clifford. If you could talk briefly about the major differences between a PhD program in the US and in the UK.
Sure. Can I just also comment on the last point as well? I think I wanted to really emphasize what Vishal was saying about researching your advisor. They're the most important person. You want to know everything about their group, but about them as a researcher and who they interact with, because these are going to be your referees, these references for your job. This is how you're going to get employment afterwards. So if you go and work for somebody who is in a meta lab where you don't get to know them very well, they don't give you a very strong reference, then your chances of getting employed in the area that you want to be working in are reduced. So I wouldn't worry too much about are they at a big university, but more about what's their reputation in the field. You'll find plenty of people that who've taken life choices to be at different universities that are actually world class, and they might be the people that you're better off targeting. I wanted to emphasize the comment about stock emails as well. I get I can answer about 20% of the emails I receive. If I'm lucky, maybe 2%. I'm not sure. It's somewhere between the two. So I do read emails that come in from students, but if it's a stock email, especially if the font's changed where it says Dear, then I delete it immediately because I know that they haven't researched it. And then if they give me a long, then there's a flip side of that, which is if you write an essay on what research you want to do for me, then I'll probably not be interested in that either unless it happens to fully align with what I'm doing, because I'm a megalomaniac and I'm most interested in my research, not yours. I'm being a bit flippant about that, but I prefer to do my research and for yours to align with it rather than to adopt your project. So the point is to be flexible, to be interested in several things, try and pick things that are current with that supervisor by going to Google Scholar and picking their latest publications and their preprints and trying to align with that, your interest.
Can I say one thing, Gary?
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Rosie.
Just to say a point that you made, which may be different by program, because I heard my colleague in public policy say something different. But in computing and bioinformatics and most of the biological and physical sciences, you are not going to come in and do your own thing. The truth is that faculty, like Gary said, have specific funding orientations, and they're going to do what they're doing. So it's also a misperception that you're going to be able to do whatever you want. It's impossible unless you have your own funding. So please be careful, because another takeoff is, I'm interested in doing X. And then I say, like Gary said, sorry, that sounds good, but I'm not either. So be realistic.
Yeah. And it's to
Can
do
I pipe in here for a quick sec also? Oh, sorry, Gary.
No, go ahead. Please.
I was going to say, a lot of the conversation, and I think this might be difficult for some of the students to kind of navigate through, is I think we've been mixing some discussion here about, and there's a couple questions about master's program routes versus PhD program routes, and a lot of the comments are about PhDs. But for example, in our school and a lot of the schools, although this is very discipline specific, is that there are things called terminal master's degrees that are designed to sort of stop there, not necessarily prepare you for the PhD, but instead prepare you for the work world. So that's, the law school, but also the master's in public administration, master's in public policy, which is what we offer, the master's in analytics that we have at Georgia Tech. So there are programs like that that are actually designed to sort of build your skills to sort of move you out. Now, that doesn't mean that if you go into those programs that you won't someday go into a PhD program, but that there is a difference in graduate school traditions. In some disciplines, you don't really ever do a master's without continuing on for your PhD. So there's, those things too, I think, understand, but I also really just wanted to add to the points about research areas and so on, if you go in and this is for more for the PhD, if you go in and you say, I want to do X, it's really important that you find that faculty member who may not do X, but will support you doing X, right? And so that may be your dissertation research, but in the meantime, you'll be building your skills and your knowledge by working on a project that may not be your complete passion, but you're learning how to be a researcher in doing that. And so you don't want to discount research opportunities that don't align perfectly with your interests, because you're still going to learn a lot, and you have to kind of get comfortable with that so that you can build toward doing your own X, your own kind of thing. And then the last point I wanted to say about that is, and I'm sure that there's a lot of difference across the disciplines and certainly across the schools that you'll apply to. But for example, in our PhD program, we don't admit students unless we can fund them. But our funding comes completely from external funding. We don't have any other institutional resources for that. Master's students can come in and either pay their own way, get a TA or an RA kind of thing, but not everybody who comes in gets accepted. So you also want to ask about how students are, what opportunities there are for support, because that support will pay your tuition and give you a stipend. So, but that's very school and discipline specific.
Yeah, just to echo off that as well, I think the key is to not be fixated on a particular area, because if you were to guess what your job was going to be 10 years from now, and you'd be disappointed by the time you got there. I went to do a PhD in neural networks back in the 90s when it was a really bad idea, and because I was fascinated by the theoretical concept. I'm a theoretical physicist by training, but then the application area that paid for it was in biomedical monitoring. So I applied neural networks to physiological monitoring, and that's how I ended up where I am. That became my research area because I became so passionate about it. So and I still apply machine learning to that area, but I've managed to balance the two between creating an application and income and the research. I should answer the question about differences between the US and the UK. The application procedure is pretty similar in that there's an online form. It's different for every university. We don't have a central pooling. They are interested in your GRE scores, but it's not a prerequisite. The key there is to approach a specific supervisor, and it's really the same as my advice for the US. You find somebody that you align with, and then you apply to that program, and they will see your application and likely support it from the inside, not in a biased way, but in somebody that they've had a conversation with and said, okay, they seem like a pretty intelligent and keen student, so I'm going to admit them to the interview stage. So what I will say about the UK system is that I think your likelihood of getting into a master's program is a lot higher than a PhD program, and that can be a route into a PhD. So a lot of PhD students master's students transition from master's to PhD students, and the funding. Once you do that, the funding is. We don't take PhD students on if we don't already have funding in the UK. So basically, your entire PhD is paid for. And it's changing, but the stresses on coursework tend to be lower as well. So we go more deeply, we're more into depth than we are into breadth. So you don't have to do 1,000 courses. Of course, our undergraduates are like that as well. So you may already have expected to have done a certain number of courses, which is why I would advise going the master's route and then on to the PhD.
Thank you so much. So our next question, again, if we could pull out about two or so persons who want to answer this, but what are some of the fundamental elements that you see faculty review committees looking for when reviewing applicants or applications?
I'll chime in. I put a little bit in the chat here. I think that a really important kind of a guiding principle for most applicant review committees is do we see that this student, do they demonstrate the skills, experience, interest in, and are they likely to be successful in the program that we have laid out? So it doesn't mean, like I think to Julia's point earlier, it doesn't mean that all of the experiences have to exactly match what you're going to do in your PhD or your master's program, but you do have to show and be able to communicate how you would fit into that program, and that committee can really envision you being very successful in this program. I think that's a very big guiding principle.
And that means really doing your research on those websites and the other advice on reading papers and looking at those other things. I think that interest is really important. You know, it's sort of, I see myself here because X. It can differentiate students, and it can also help you overcome maybe what you see are potential weaknesses or gaps in your record.
So do that research prior to applying, utilize that information that you've researched to actually apply. While applying, you want to be reaching out to those potential advisors and do that in a way that is well researched and not overwhelming, so that they can actually know that you're interested in their particular program.
Can I just say one quick thing that differentiates graduate admissions from undergraduate admissions? Undergraduate admissions are highly centralized in schools, whereas graduate admissions are actually made by a committee of faculty in the department that you're interested in. And that's another thing that I'm not sure that students may realize. So for undergrads, I've never seen an undergraduate application because I've never been on that central committee, but I see every single graduate application that comes in because you're applying to the department, not to the school. So that, I think, it also addresses one of the other questions that was in the chat, which is, does it hurt you to apply to multiple programs in a school? Well, I would question why you're so distributed, but if you're kind of trying to decide, or if they're kind of close to each other, or maybe you're thinking about a cross-disciplinary degree of some sort, it just needs to make sense.
Can I add one point to this? Because I've seen this on, where students have been caught off guard by this on the application process. So sometimes students will apply to a PhD program and assume that they would automatically be considered for a master's program, let's say, if they weren't accepted to the PhD program. And know that that is not an automatic thing. And it does depend on the school. There may be some committees who would offer the admission to a master's program if you're not accepted into the PhD, but I would absolutely check on that. And most schools would actually require a separate application. So that's an important point to remember.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. We have about 2 minutes left, so I want to quickly go back to our graduate students. And if you could just let everybody know quickly, where are you right now? What do you envision for yourself at this point? What's your goal for yourself after graduate school? And it's okay if the answer is I don't know.
So my answer is I don't know. I'm still deciding whether I want to go back to industry or whether I should have a career in academia or not. And I think it's completely normal, because as you progress during your degrees, whether it's masters or PhDs, you will meet different people. You will get the opportunity to do internships also with different people in academia as well as in industry, which will give you an idea about how it is working in that particular culture. So I think it's completely fine if you haven't decided. At least I haven't decided it yet, like what I want to do after my PhD.
All right, Yasmin?
I can go next. So I'm also along the I don't really know-ish. I'm really interested in computational neuroscience. That's kind of my research in general. And so I'm through different labs. And so I guess that's another really random note that some programs will have you do will have you just join a lab specifically. But I'm currently doing rotations, and so for post-PhD, I'm interested in probably going into computational neuroscience research through like neuroscience industry routes. and not necessarily academia. But I'm also incredibly interested in science communication and science policy. And so those are also options for me. My internet's going in and out, so I'm not sure if you can hear the rest of what I'm saying. But those are also options. And so I'm not sure where I'll land in that, but I know that I'm keeping my options open for post-PhD.
And Amanda, I know you finished graduate school, so my question is more, are you doing what you intended to do when you started graduate school?
So yeah, I mean, in all honesty, when I went into MPH, I had initially planned on doing MD PhD, and I wanted a little bit of the public health perspective, and I'm actually really glad that I did go into it. You know, while working at the CDC, especially in the pandemic, I've realized that I'm actually a bit of a virology nerd. So I am planning on going back to school. I might work another year or two just to not be broke. But yeah, I am planning on going back for a PhD, probably in either virology or immunology.
Excellent. And then Josh.
Yes, so I really am not sure exactly what I want to do, you know, right after the master's program, but long term, I would like to, you know, I've gone into higher levels of education just to be a better decision maker, especially like, you know, for my community. So, you know, in public policy, you know, you're responsible for a lot of decisions that affect a lot of people. And so, you know, as I was getting close to graduating with my undergrad, I had learned a lot, but I felt like there was more to learn before I jumped into, you know, making an impact in the community type thing. So.
Thank you. Risha, any last minute questions or thoughts?
So I know we're very much out of time, so want to thank all our panelists for being here and for all our attendees as well. This again is a recorded event, and so we'll have the information for you, and we'll send that out as soon as it's uploaded to YouTube. So keep an eye out for that. Also, we're going to have this open for a little while, and so please go ahead and look in the chat. A number of our panelists have actually been gracious enough to put in their contact information in there as well. So feel free to reach out to our individual panelists as requested. And again, thank you so much for being here. Susan, any last words?
No, just those of you who are prospective graduate students, I'm on campus to help you with your decision about graduate school, master's or PhD, or should you do it at all? Should you work first? Lots of questions, and I support undergraduates, graduate students, so if you're a master's student thinking about a doctorate, and I also support alumni. So if you're out in the work world or thinking about going back to school, you can make an appointment with me through AdvisorLink, our new advising system. And if you are an alum, you probably can't access that system yet, so you can email me and I'll put my email in the chat. And thank you, everybody, all of our panelists. This has been great. I've learned a lot as well. So.